Well, good morning. Suddenly I went from absolutely no tech to high tech. It was suggested to me that maybe some people, it's their first time at Hokyoji, so they may be wondering who that man is on the altar that we bow in appreciation to in the morning. So the rest of you all know deeply who that is, but I just thought I'd say something to help. That's Dainin Katagiri Roshi, and he was the founder. He's the founder of this temple and also Minnesota Zen Meditation Center. He came to Minnesota from first Japan and then San Francisco, where he helped Suzuki Roshi at the Zen Shuji Soto Zen Mission in Los Angeles, and then later at the San Francisco Zen Center, particularly from 1969 to 1971 when Suzuki Roshi passed away. And then he was, inveigled to come to Minnesota by Karen Suna and who was the other person? Nancy James, yeah.
Probably Eric.
And Eric Storley, yeah. Anyway, he came here and he taught in southeast Minneapolis near the university in a duplex upstairs for a while, and then they bought the house on Bidemakuska, and that's a lake, and he taught there until he passed away in 1990. So we call him Hojo-san, so you might hear Hojo-san said. So I want to, for us, Hojo-san means like he's a dear teacher, but a Hojo is the size of a tatami mat, making a room that's 10 feet square, and that's coming from a famous sutra or set of stories called Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra, which is a bunch of really wild stories about what happened one day in a Hojo, in a 10-foot square room, with an ill-enlightened layman's meeting with remarkable bodhisattvas. So that's kind of what a Hojo is. But here's what Katagiri said. He said, you can call me Hojo because I'm like a tatami mat. Everyone walks on me. That's what he said. So does that help? A little bit. So some of the people here, me and Dokai and Ekkyo and John, studied directly with Katagiri Roshi. Kim, did you? Yeah, you also did?
I attended.
You attended? And he was very endearing. He could somehow be very endearing and very strict all at the same time. So he was very dear to us. So this place where we're sitting was his vision, which was not completed in his lifetime. So I'll just tell you that the first session we had on the land, we all slept in a huge army tent and sat and slept in a huge army tent out there. And it rained a lot. It was Memorial Day. And the bathroom was in the woods. With the shovel was the door. If the shovel was up, you could go. If the shovel, you didn't see the shovel, somebody else was there. It was pretty wild. So also there are compilations of his Dharma talks. You can find them on Google if you just Google Katagiri Roshi. Okay, does that kind of give you a flavor?
There's also a very rich website RMC's webpage. And there's lots of photographs and stories.
That's great. So just to get a flavor of how it is we all got here. So now back to here. So the Rohatsu Sesshin means head of the year, Rohatsu. And the reason this particular sesshin is special is because we commemorate Buddha's enlightenment. We say it's on December 8th, but it doesn't really matter exactly the date. What I love about Rohatsu is it's the darkest and quietest time of the year, and that we are held by that dark. And there's also a certain pressure or compression from the dark, because I know my ordinary self gets annoyed when the time changes and now it's dark all the time, and I don't like it. But when I come for practice and it's dark, I can feel the dark holding something. So at this dark time, the miracle of awakening arose out of the dark. And of course, that's not unusual, because in Christianity, Christ was born in the dark. And also Hanukkah is happening, all the lights are being lit in the dark. So there's dark and light, and we chant about dark and light, in the harmony of difference and sameness, right? So there's a kind of miracle. It's just dawning on me to remember this. On the dreidel, I can't remember the Hebrew, but it means a great miracle happened there in the Hebrew letters on the dreidel. Shin, something, something. Anyway, I don't remember. Anyway, that miracle's happening right now. Right now. So for that miracle to happen, there's a lattice of support for the embodiment of awakening. For me, the interest was not so much in, like, I want to get enlightened. More like, I'm suffering and I'm confused, and I want to do something with that. Let's see what I want to say about that. So my interest was, well, if that can happen, can I live in the world in a way that brings lightness and love and compassion to me and from me and around everywhere, so that there's an embodied presence that can make a difference. That was my interest. It's still my interest. I worked for 14 years as a hospital chaplain, an interfaith hospital chaplain. And part of that experiment was like, well, what happens? You know, like when the sort of the practice has to get really concentrated, because you're walking right into a situation that everyone agrees is suffering. Of course, you know, you don't have to go to a hospital. You can go to the grocery store. It's everywhere. But that was and can I do this with everyone? Not just people who go to the Zen Center. So that was my exploration for 14 years. I just retired last January. So for that embodiment to unfold, we need some guidelines, because we're so confused. You know, we can just see, like in the smallest way, we get confused. So what is right action in this moment? We don't always know. So we have some help. And these guidelines are called the 16 Bodhisattva Precepts. 16 Bodhisattva Precepts. So these are so powerful, they're called the blood vein, blood of our practice. And for instance, in Zen practice, these precepts are offered in 3 different ceremonies, which we take on to consolidate our intention to live in a good way, in a way that relieves suffering, and that deeply understands and realizes these precepts and the gifts of the Buddha's insight. So that's not a one-stop shop. That's like a forever. So we need a lot of support. The precepts are given in lay ordination, and they're given in priest ordination, and they're given in transmission ceremonies. So those are 3 kind of doorways. And what I love is that when you do those ceremonies, you don't get a pat on the head or like a special status. What you get are the precepts. That's what's given. We receive the guidance of our ancestors, all of their research, effort, intention, and wisdom is distilled into these 16 Bodhisattva precepts. So in preparing this, Kyoku and I had quite a few conversations. And one time I just went, oh, Moses goes up to Sinai. He's got this group of people that are a mess. They're whining and they're scared and they're like, what are we doing here? And they even, make an idol while he's up on the mountain. So he gets them out of Egypt and they're a wreck. So he comes down, and what does he come down with? The 10 Commandments. He comes down with the precepts. That's what struck me. And so I said, wow, since I'm an interfaith chaplain, I'm a person who notices these patterns because it helped my work. And besides, I've been interested in it since I was 8 years old. So I thought that was great. So the commandments are kind of the basis of Western morality. So it's not like we didn't notice that there were some guidelines. And this week we're chanting, as you notice, the precepts in the evening. And we're going to contemplate them. So they're our theme for this year. And so I invite you to just kind of snuggle up to the precepts and just notice how you dance with them, or how they affect you, or how you fight with them, or that's what we do. It's a big, big koan of right action in the moment, an appropriate response. That's the precepts. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about where they come from in our tradition. So people started hanging out with the Buddha, and after he, which we'll have a ceremony to acknowledge this, he had his big awakening, and he went back to his buddies that he was experimenting with and trying to see through with, his 5 friends. And there's a process of recognition where they realize, oh, wait, what happened to you? So then he started teaching at that point, where they begged him to start teaching. So right away, there's people trying to do something, so there have to be guidelines because there's problems, because that's how it is. So these rules came about because of actual everyday situations that happened. And something had to be decided. There was a problematic issue, someone brought it to the Buddha, and then they established a rule to take care that this difficulty was not repeated, because they wanted to live together in peace and harmony. So they needed rules of behavior. And the rules are based on real life stuff. So then the Buddha died at age 81, I think, or 80, something like that. And they had a meeting. And Upali had memorized all of the admonitions the whole time Buddha was alive. Do this, don't do this, etc. And he recited all of them, and that was collected into what's called the Vinaya, which is the original set of precepts or guidelines for monks and nuns. There were 227 precepts for monks and 311 for nuns. That's a whole nother lecture, which we're not having right now. Okay, so in the Pali Canon, that was the language that Buddha spoke, Pali. There's 3 collections or baskets, and the first one, the oldest one, is the Vinaya. Like, this is how you get along. So this contains the rules governing behavior of the Buddhist monastics, and the other 2 parts, the other 2 baskets are the sutras or the suttas, and the Abhidharma Pitaka, which is kind of like Buddhist psychology. However, in the beginning of the 9th century CE, Saicho, who lived from 767 to 822, who was the founder of the Tendai school in Japan, into which Dogen was initiated, he decided that it was necessary to confer only the Mahayana precepts. And his reason for this was that Japan was a Mahayana country and the Vinaya was not Mahayana. Now, it just so happens that I'm reading a book about a young man who went to Japan to teach English. And I'm getting a lot of feeling for Japanese culture and kind of view of themselves in the world. It's fascinating. So when I read this, I went, oh yeah, that makes sense, based on what I'm reading. And so it was kind of political. The Japanese, according to this young man who wrote the book, feel that they are very particular and only they can understand themselves. And so they have a particular, and they have to differentiate themselves from everyone around. That's in the book. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It was by Bruce Feiler or something like that. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll try to look it up on my phone for you. So Dogen, who is the founder of the Soto school in Japan, he lived from 1200 to 1253. He became a monk when he was 13 years old. And he only received the Mahayana precepts, the 16 Bodhisattva precepts, not the 227 Vinaya precepts. Now, that's kind of all boring, but the important thing is that the nature of the Bodhisattva precepts that we receive in the Soto Zen tradition is a little different than the Vinaya precepts. The quality and the point of view is slightly different, so kind of that's what I'm going to talk about now. So it is said that the Bodhisattva precepts were established as soon as the Buddha attained unsurpassable awakening and even before he began to teach. So, what? So this is good, because this is this kind of language that interferes with time and interferes with subject and object that's famous in Zen, and here it is. Well, historically, that's not true. That didn't happen. But here's what it says, that the precepts arose as part of the awakening. They were part and parcel of the awakening. So that's a point of view. So this story underlies a crucial characteristic of the 16 Bodhisattva precepts. And this characteristic is that these guidelines are alive both in the relative world, like don't hit the ino. Okay, don't do that. That's the relative world. But also in the absolute world, the world of complete awakening, non-duality world. And the opportunity we have is to practice and realize them in both realms. So for me, if we just stay in the relative realm, we're going to end up like a neurotic mess. Because, did I break the rule? Didn't I break the rule? Oh no. And then everything that comes up, if I think I'm bad because I broke the rule, but on the other hand, don't hit the eno. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not true that you shouldn't hit the eno. However, this desire to awaken the bodhicitta also has two main components. The relative aspect of bodhicitta, which is that we all have it, or we wouldn't be sitting in this room. That wish to understand deeply, to make a difference, to see with Buddha's eye. So the relative aspect is the intention and wish nurtured by limitless compassion to attain liberation for the sake of all beings. So basically we're chanting that every day. And B, the actual practice, the entrance into meditation, and the purpose of which is many things, but one is the acquisition of appropriate means to actualize that wish. So there we go again, back to the lattice, like what is appropriate response in this moment? Joseph Goldstein, a famous Western Vipassana teacher, quotes a Tibetan yogi named Shapkar, who says this about absolute and relative bodhicitta. The mind's nature is vivid as a flawless piece of crystal, intrinsically empty, naturally radiant, ceaselessly responsive. So that's inspiring. When I hear that, I go, okay, I can breathe. I can get a little more oxygen. And Dogen Zenji points this out too at the beginning of his fascicle Kyoju Kaiman, which is comments on teaching and conferring the precepts. I'm just going to quote him, the great precepts of the Buddhas have been upheld and maintained by the Buddhas. Buddhas conferred them to Buddhas, and ancestors transmitted them to ancestors. Receiving the precepts transcends the borders of past, present, and future. So I love that, how we're connected by that quest and by that understanding. And then I luckily found that Shohaku Okamura had written about this. Exactly what I needed to know. Thank you, Shohaku Roshi. the precepts are the same as the true Dharma that has been transmitted by Buddhas and ancestors. So that's what Dogen said. The 10 precepts are the 10 ethical aspects of the Dharma to which the Buddha has awakened. In other words, impermanence, egolessness, and the interdependent origination of all things is the basis of the precepts and is the reality to which the Buddha awakened. So there he's saying the precepts and what the Buddha awakened to are the living fabric of that awakening. So when we awaken to the fact that each thing is interconnected to every other thing, like all the little knots in Indra's net, we see that we are supported by everything and live together with everything. We can only exist within relationships with others. So when I was getting ready to come, every time I forget how much effort it is to get ready to come. I forget every time. And I don't leave myself quite enough time. Like I said to myself, next time, 2 weeks. Preparing everything. It's not just the talk, it's my mind, it's the house, it's the cats, it's the snow. It's a lot. So then I sent an email to my Dakini group of women. And I said, send me prayers. And my friend Diane, who's a rabbi in California, she said, this is what she said. This is an interconnected event. You just have to go with the flow. The flow will take it. Just be open. I went, oh yeah, that's right, thank you. I just needed that Kiyosako. So we can only exist within relationship with others. That reality is the source of the precepts. When we see the interconnectedness of all beings, we can only try to be helpful to them and avoid being harmful. Do good, don't do harm, save all living beings. Those are the 3 pure precepts, according to our friend Byakuren. So then, how do we get there? So probably we've come to practice Zazen because we know we have suffering. We have suffering. The world is really suffering right now, in particular. The very earth is suffering. It just breaks my heart. So many things, right? We could just make a list. It's a really tricky, upsetting, frustrating time in which hopelessness can certainly arise. There's so much threat on the planet right now. The other day I heard that the deer are coming down with COVID. The deer. Oh my God. So I just contracted. Qualities that are very the opposite of love and compassion seem to be just zooming around. Overwhelming stress, fear, shame, blame, illness and death, loss, disappointment, hopelessness, authoritarian governments. It's really rough out there. It's really frightening. So it doesn't feel so easy to touch into the jewel spring, the source of being. But here, so much has been done. Like 45 years of work has been done in the big picture, and so much has been done by the staff here to make it possible to have a supportive environment, to nourish our capacity to trust our true nature. Maybe we will touch it. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll sit outside the gates and just get wet and snowed on. But it's all good. Beyond what we think we understand. Roshi used to say, Your practice is not your business. That's a relief. Just sit down. Also, he used to say, just sit down and shut up. With a lot of love. So exactly because things are like this, I feel vulnerable. Maybe also you feel vulnerable. We're vulnerable. That's good. That may allow a natural movement to enter the gateway of precept practice. And that gateway is confession or contrition. All my ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. I don't know about you, but I just feel relief when not only do we say that, but I get to put my head down and lift up my hands. Because then I just have to give up trying to be good, in a sense, or being right, or being anything in particular. We live in, and we are, a sea of fathomless causes and conditions. We together are bringing and cultivating the light of awareness to the conditions that will make themselves known to us right here and now. And awareness will receive all of it. I think this is love. So I see this verse as a softening verse, an accepting verse, not a beating myself up verse. And having met myself as this verse, I need the trellis of the precepts. They are the rope holds on the bridge, you know, those bridges that go over the river gorge that are made of hemp or something. And you have to hold onto the ropes to get across the bridge. Their bridge is going over the swollen river gorge of samsaric life, and I'm holding on to the precepts. Hatred, this is in my front yard. I had my friend make me a pattern so I could make a sign. I thought all my neighbors would want one, but only I wanted one. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. That's from the Dhammapada. So having opened our hearts with a sincere act of contrition, now we can snuggle close to the three refuges: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So here's a new translation of the three refuges from Byakuran. The Buddha, I take refuge in unconstructed reality, Dharma. I take refuge in the creative energies of life, Sangha. I take refuge in compassionately responsive relationships. So that's another alternative translation. And following on from that, we bring into our hearts the three pure precepts, which I just sang to you, right? I love it as a song because then I don't forget. Do good, don't do harm, save all living beings. Do you want to sing it?
Sure.
Okay, let's try. Do good, don't do harm, save all living beings. Awesome. And then after that, we have a lifetime, or maybe lifetime after lifetime, to realize that we can never perfectly live into and out of the 10 grave prohibitory precepts, which are, I vow not to kill. I vow not to take what is not given. I vow not to misuse sexuality. I vow to refrain from false speech. I vow to refrain from intoxicants. I vow not to slander. I vow not to praise self at the expense of others. I vow not to be avaricious. I vow not to harbor ill will. I vow not to disparage the three treasures. There's many translations, and we're chanting a beautiful version of this thanks to Kyoku and Clouds and Water in the evening. Okay, realizing the impossibility of perfection. Realizing the impossibility of perfection is something wonderful. It leads us through the conventional understanding of this precepts, what we should do, what we mustn't do, to the ultimate foundation of our bodhisattva vow as realized by the Buddha in this dark month of December, which is now. So then I want to talk a little bit about alignment. So we're aligning our body, hearts, and minds with the Buddha's teaching. We're saying, I'm available. I'm sitting down. I'm shutting up. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm available. I'm available. I'm available, and I'm vowing to align with these particular insights right now. So we sit down. We arrive here, we arrive now, maybe the whole sitting, we're just arriving here and now, that's fine. Breath by breath, and we make ourselves available to whatever is arising as the teaching of the moment. And then we align with the Dharma, the creative and living teaching of the Buddha, which is unfolding for us through our intention. We align with it, and it aligns us with reality. It's the great chiropractor called practice. We turn the wheel, and we are turned by it. And I know, because most people here have practiced a long time, that we've heard that before, but every time I hear it, I feel relief, like, oh, that's right. We turn the wheel and we are turned by it. We can't do whatever it is we're here to do by self-power. It's different than fixing the tire on your car. Oh, whoops. So on Wednesday, I'm going to talk again on Wednesday, and I will tell you a story about our ancestor Yaoshan. I think I just want to say that this getting alongside the precepts is something tender. It's something tender, which is, I don't know, I wasn't raised that way. I was raised with, you're right or you're wrong. And then no help for you if you're wrong, you know. So I don't see it this way. I see it as, what's happening about this? And like doing deep research into each precept. I vow not to kill. Okay, I won't kill the, I promise. But what is that? Like, am I also then killing my sense of self, saying my ego is bad because this strong impulse arose? That's not helpful. So how tender can we be to what, that takes a lot of skill. As someone who's been practicing 45 years, I can tell you it takes a lot of skill to be tender as we approach these guidelines for ourselves. So here is a quote from the Buddha to end, almost end. On Vulture Peak, he said, I have the treasury of the true Dharma, I, the sublime mind of Nirvana, whose true sign is signlessness, the sublime Dharma gate, which without words or phrases is transmitted outside of the standard teachings, and which I bestow upon Mahakashyapa, which is everybody here. And then to end, I have a short poem by E.Q. from Crow with No Mouth. Don't wait for the man standing in the snow to cut off his arm. Help him now. Do you know what that is about, right? No. Emerson's nodding. Would you share with us?
I might not get it totally right, but I believe a monk, who I'm forgetting the person he wanted to study, at a temple, and it was common practice to wait for some time to get permitted, and so as a demonstration of the monk's commitment, cut off his arm.
So it was Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma famously practiced in a cave for 9 years facing the wall. It's the story. And Dokai, what's the name of his disciple?
Huiko.
Yeah, Huiko, thank you. Huiko stood outside the entrance of the cave for, I don't know, 3 days, what? And finally, to get Bodhidharma's attention, he cut off his arm. Okay, that's the story. I'm not suggesting, please don't do that while you're here. But, so that's the story that's in the poem, that EQ, who is a wild and crazy Zen teacher from a few years ago, said, he was very passionate. I love EQ. Don't wait for the man standing in the snow to cut off his arm. Help him now. So that's what we're doing. We're helping him. That's us, too, now. Okay, how did I have no idea. Oh my God, okay. I think am I asking for questions? Yes? Yeah, it's my choice. Is there anybody who needs to say something or ask something? Okay.